So, the Nissan Leaf and the Citroën C5 Aircross are two cars that look like they are completely different jobs. One is a fully electric hatchback that promises cheap motoring and stress-free commuting, while the other is a soft, comfortable French SUV designed to make British roads feel less miserable. But here's the interesting thing. When you actually live with these cars in the UK, there are some things reviewers don't really tell you. And some of these hidden realities can completely change whether you'd actually want to own one. Now let's start with the Nissan Leaf, because on paper, this thing sounds brilliant for Britain. Used prices have dropped massively. Electricity is still cheaper than petrol for a lot of people charging at home. And for commuting or city driving, the Leaf genuinely makes a lot of sense. It's quiet, smooth, ridiculously easy to drive, and if your daily routine is school runs, supermarket trips, and sitting in traffic around Birmingham or London, you'll probably love it. But the first thing reviewers don't really explain properly is a charging situation. The Nissan Leaf still uses CHAdeMO charging on many versions, and honestly, in 2026 that's starting to feel like buying into old technology. Most modern EVs in the UK now use CCS charging, and more charging companies are prioritizing CCS infrastructure. That means if you're on a motorway service station and every charger is busy, you might find fewer CHAdeMO options available. And yes, there are still chargers around, but the concern for a lot of buyers is the future. People don't just buy cars for 1 year. They think 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead. And the uncomfortable question is whether the UK charging network will continue properly supporting CHAdeMO long term. And this becomes even more obvious when you take the Leaf onto the motorway. This is something almost every EV owner notices eventually. That advertised range figure suddenly changes dramatically once you're cruising at 70 miles per hour on the M1 in winter with the heater running. Around town, the Leaf feels efficient and clever. On the motorway, it can feel like the battery percentage is falling faster than expected. Reviewers often do these ideal condition range tests, but real British weather is different. Cold mornings, rain, traffic, heating, motorway speeds, all of that affects the Leaf much more than many first-time EV buyers expect. A car advertised with over 200 miles of range can suddenly feel much closer to 120 or 140 miles on a long winter motorway journey. And for some people, that's completely fine. But for others, especially drivers doing regular long-distance trips, it becomes stressful surprisingly quickly. Then there's another issue people don't mention: enough battery cooling. The Leaf famously doesn't have the same advanced active thermal battery cooling systems you see in many newer EVs. Now, if you're just commuting locally, you may never notice this. But if you attempt longer road trips involving repeated rapid charging stops, the battery can heat up and charging speeds may slow down significantly. So ironically, the further you drive, the less convenient the Leaf can become. This is why some Leaf owners absolutely love the car, while others get frustrated with it. It really depends how you use it. If your life is mostly urban driving, it's brilliant value. But if you regularly drive from London to Manchester or do Scottish road trips, suddenly its limitations become very noticeable. And then there's the infotainment system. This might sound minor, but modern buyers care massively about technology. And compared to newer EVs from Tesla, Hyundai, Kia, or even BYD, the Leaf's interior tech is starting to feel old. The graphics look dated, the software isn't especially fast, and the whole experience lacks the futuristic feeling people now expect from EVs. Some owners won't care at all because they just want a reliable, cheap EV. But others step inside and immediately feel like the car belongs to a previous generation of electric vehicles. Now let's move to the Citroën C5 Aircross, because this car has a completely different personality. If the Nissan Leaf feels like a practical appliance, the C5 Aircross feels like a rolling sofa. And honestly, that's either going to sound amazing to you or terrible. Because the biggest thing reviewers don't fully explain about the C5 Aircross is just how soft it feels on the road. Citroën designed this SUV around comfort, and on broken British roads it can feel genuinely fantastic. Potholes, speed bumps, rough surfaces, the suspension absorbs everything in a way many sporty SUVs simply don't. Around town, especially in places with poor road surfaces, the C5 Aircross feels relaxed and calming. But there's another side to this softness. Push it harder on a country road and suddenly you notice the body roll, the softer steering, and the fact this really isn't a sporty SUV at all. And that's where expectations become important. Some reviewers praise the comfort without explaining the trade-off properly. This isn't a Mazda CX-5 or a BMW X1. It's not trying to feel sharp or athletic. In fast corners, the car leans noticeably, and enthusiastic drivers may find it frustrating. But here's the funny thing: many real owners actually prefer this setup. After years of increasingly stiff SUVs with giant wheels and sporty suspension, the C5 Aircross almost feels rebellious. It prioritizes comfort instead of pretending to be a race car. And for British families driving on terrible roads every day, that can actually be a huge advantage. But then we get to the infotainment system, and again, this is an area reviewers sometimes gloss over. The interior looks modern, but daily usability can occasionally become annoying. Certain climate controls are buried inside the touchscreen, menus can feel less intuitive than rivals, and sometimes the software responsiveness isn't perfect. These little frustrations matter because drivers interact with this stuff every single day. If you're constantly adjusting heating or media controls through a touchscreen while driving in traffic, it can get irritating surprisingly fast. And then we need to talk about depreciation, because this is one of the biggest hidden realities of the C5 Aircross. French cars traditionally depreciate faster in the UK compared to brands like Toyota, Kia, or Hyundai. That means if you buy brand new, resale values may disappoint you. But there's actually another side to this story. For used buyers, the C5 Aircross can become an incredible bargain. You're getting a comfortable, spacious family SUV with lots of features for significantly less money than many rivals. So depending on whether you buy new or used, depreciation can either be a weakness or one of the car's biggest strengths. What's fascinating is that these two cars represent completely different approaches to modern driving in Britain. The Nissan Leaf is trying to reduce running costs and make everyday commuting cheaper and easier. The Citroën C5 Aircross is trying to reduce stress and make driving more relaxing. Neither is perfect, and that's exactly the kind of thing many traditional reviews fail to explain properly. Real ownership isn't about spec sheets. It's about how a car fits into your actual lifestyle. If you live in a city, have home charging, and mainly do short journeys, the Leaf can genuinely feel like one of the smartest cheap used cars in the UK right now. But if you're constantly driving long motorway distances, the charging limitations and motorway range drop can become frustrating. Meanwhile, the C5 Aircross might annoy enthusiastic drivers with its soft handling, but if your priority is comfort and practicality for family life, it can feel refreshingly honest compared to sportier SUVs trying too hard. And maybe that's the most interesting thing about both of these cars. They both ignore certain trends. The Leaf still feels like an old-school practical EV focused on affordability rather than flashy technology. The C5 Aircross refuses to become another fake sports SUV and instead focuses almost entirely on comfort. In a weird way, both cars feel slightly unfashionable, but that's also what makes them interesting. So if you had to choose, which compromise would you rather live with? The Nissan Leaf's charging limitations and aging tech in exchange for incredibly cheap EV ownership, or the Citroën C5 Aircross's soft handling and depreciation in exchange for one of the most comfortable rides in the class? Honestly, there's no perfect answer. It completely depends on your lifestyle. But these are exactly the things reviewers don't always tell you before you buy.